I'm Jolene Wynn, and this is the Porn Addict's Wife podcast, episode 240, Emotional Habits. If your husband is struggling with a pornography problem and you want some help with it and you are not finding the resources that you like, you are in the right place. My name is Jolene Wynn. I am a certified life coach. I am an active member of the LDS faith, and I am the wife of a former porn addict. And on this podcast, I am going to share with you the tools that you need in order to start your healing journey. This is where I'm going to show you how to dive deep into intentional living, how to rekindle connection with your spouse, how to manage all that emotional turmoil that you're feeling, how to break the addiction cycle that you have to your husband's addiction, and tell you all of the ways to do that and start healing. I am so glad that you're here, and I can't wait to get started. Let's go. Hello, my ladies. Welcome back to the podcast. And I hope you guys had a very Merry Christmas. And as we dive into today's topic, which is emotional habits, this is something that was inspired by a conversation that I had with my husband. I've been thinking a lot about the new year. And as you guys know, I am hosting a masterclass next week. It's going to be Monday, January 6th through the 9th. It's a 4-day masterclass. If you guys haven't come to these, I would really encourage you to come to it. And in this class, I focus every time in my master classes on a different topic. And what I really wanted to focus on this year is I don't want to focus on goals. I mean, goals are great. Love them. Resolutions, all for them. Do it every year. But it can be so hard to focus on or even consider resolutions and goals when you feel like you're just struggling to get through the day. So what I wanted to do was create a class that you can come back to every single year or anytime that you want to reset. It's something that I taught at my in-person retreat this year, was how to emotionally reset. How do you start over? And I know that so many of us are thinking about fresh starts and thinking about starting over and new beginnings, and yet it can be so difficult to do that when your circumstances aren't changing, and they don't look like they're going to change, and they look like they're not in your control. And I want to teach you how to actually reset from the inside out, so that even if your circumstances don't shift at all, you don't need them to. So again, I would love for you guys to come to this class. It's just $149. You can join for the whole week. You can use the code EMAIL50, and that will give you, I'll put that in the show notes, but that will give you $50 off. So you can join for just $99. You can join for all 4 days. Not only do you get to come live to all the Zoom calls, you get all the coaching, all the content, you also get access to all of the replays. And that's something that's going to be super beneficial, especially for this class, because again, you can come back to it at least every year. And then everything that I do and create is going to be designed so that you can come back to it every year and recenter. It's all about really creating a solid foundation for you internally. And then if you want to set goals from there, awesome. But most of the time we try to set goals for changing everything around us, hoping it'll make ourselves feel better. Okay, well, I'm going to lose weight because that'll make me feel more confident. Or I'm going to create this habit. I'm going to start reading a book a week, okay? Even though I've never read a book in my life, because that'll make me feel like I'm doing something worthwhile, right? And that's what we usually try to do. We try to work from the outside in. And in this class, I want to teach you how to work from the inside out. I want to teach you how to really take control of your life so that this year isn't just another repeat of last year. So you don't just set the same 5 goals you set last year, that you actually accomplish and change who you are first. And that will make accomplishing goals inevitable and absolutely guaranteed. So again, I'll put the link in the show notes so that you guys can come join. I would highly encourage you to do so, especially if you're feeling like I can't even think about tomorrow because I can't even get through today. This is the class for you, okay? It's called A Year for You. I'll put the link in the show notes. Again, it's just $99 when you use the code EMAIL50. And again, I'll put that in the show notes. You can join me for a whole week. It's like a sneak peek into my pro coaching program, and I would love to see you there. Again, next Monday through Thursday. And it kind of leads me into what we're going to be talking about today, which is our emotional habits. At this time of year, again, we talk a lot about changing our habits, changing how we eat, how we exercise, what we do in our spare time, and how we spend time with our family, or maybe how much time we spend with God. We talk all about our outside habits. We talk all about our physical habits. And I want to talk today about our emotional habits. We often get into a routine or a habit, something that you repeatedly do as a pattern of behavior. We get into these emotional habits where we repeat emotional patterns, emotional behaviors. So I want to offer today that you start to look at what are your emotional habits? What are the patterns that you have of thinking and responding to yourself? How do you emotionally respond to yourself when you look in the mirror? How do you emotionally respond to yourself when you do something that isn't you at your best? One of the biggest examples that I see of an emotional habit is self-judgment. This is something I coach my clients on a ton, and it was actually something that one of my clients was talking to me about her New Year's resolutions. One of them definitely is she wants to work on her physical self and lose some weight. And she was talking to me a little bit about why this hasn't worked in the past. And one of the things that came up, she's like, well, I've tried this and this and this, and yet I'm so terrible at this. I can never get it. I never stick with it long enough. And I said, let's pause there, my lady. I love you so much. What if your New Year's resolution, along with losing weight, is to stop being so judgmental of yourself? And it just totally floored her. She was like, oh my gosh, that sounds even harder than losing weight. Because we get into these emotional habits. We get into the habit of judging ourselves. We get into the habit of self-loathing. We get into the habit of producing certain thoughts and emotions that aren't beneficial for us, but we're just in the habit of having them. We almost can't even recognize who we would be if we didn't have that emotional habit. But that's what I want to offer today, is that we start recognizing what those emotional habits are. So the kind of question that you can ask yourself is, again, like I said, what is the habit that I have? What do I feel? What do I think when I look in the mirror? What do I feel? What do I think when I don't actually stick with something as long as I thought that I should? What do I feel about myself when I don't show up at my best? These are the kind of emotional habits that we want to take a look at and, number one, be aware of, right? This is the 5 steps, same 5 steps. Step number 1 is awareness. Step number 2 is acceptance. Step number 3, we process the emotion. How do we feel about all this, right? We feel the self-judgment, we feel the self-loathing, we feel the shame, whatever the emotion is that we are habitually going back to. And then we get to change the thought. We get to pick a new one. Do I want to keep this pattern, or do I want to change it? And if I want to change it, what do I want to choose to make it be? Rather than self-judgment, can I choose to change it to self-acceptance? Rather than beating myself up for this, can I give myself grace? And then step number 5 is just retraining your brain. It's learning how to be in charge of yourself cognitively so that you can rewire those neural pathways that keep going to self-loathing, because again, they are just habits. And I know that sounds, I'm not trying to trivialize it. I'm trying to make you aware that it's 100% in your control. The way that you think about yourself, the way you feel about yourself is entirely up to you. And the way that you've been feeling about yourself, if you're not happy with that, is 100% in your ability to change. It's a beautiful thing, especially at this time of year, okay? To think about, what are the emotional habits that I have? How do I emotionally respond, okay, not only to yourself, but to those around you? And you can do this with every single relationship you have. How do I emotionally respond to my husband? How do I emotionally respond to my son? How do I emotionally respond to my mom? These are emotional habits. We react to others and to ourselves in ways that we have gotten comfortable with and developed as habits over time. This can be why it's so difficult to break, because when we have, especially in relationship to others, when you have an emotional habit, let's say your emotional habit is to get defensive. Your husband comes and talks to you, or he just walks in the front door, and your immediate reaction is to be defensive emotionally, right? Okay, so if that is your habit, then he might have a habit of responding, okay, when my wife When I walk in through the front door, I emotionally also get defensive. And when we have an emotional habit that butts up against somebody else's emotional habit, that is when it can be more difficult to change, simply because our brain wants predictability. Our brain likes what is familiar. So if you have an emotional habit of being defensive and that's what you're trying to change, your husband that may not be his goal, okay? He might not be aware that that's his habit, that that's his emotional pattern. And he might still be getting defensive or offensive when he walks in the door. You can still change yours, but it's kind of like shifting the steps in a dance. I've talked about that. I've given this example before, kind of this analogy. It's kind of like you guys have been doing the tango the whole time in your relationship. So every time he steps in the door, he knows, okay, we're going to do the tango. And then all of a sudden you start waltzing. And it's going to feel really awkward. It's going to feel really uncomfortable. And he might react differently because he's like, wait, this is not our norm. And that's totally okay. But when you want to change an emotional habit, even if it butts up against somebody else's emotional habit, you can still control your half of it. And again, it might feel uncomfortable. It might feel awkward. It might not change their behavior because your behavior does not dictate theirs. But it can influence it. Because all of a sudden, if you start waltzing, it might make him step back. And you might even tell him what's going on, or whoever it is that you're talking to, right? This is just the example we're going with, right? You can even tell him, hey, I've noticed that when you walk in the door, I get really defensive. And I want to start changing that. That's an emotional habit of mine that I want to start working on. So I'm going to be working on that. So I might not respond in the same way, or I might need a little bit of space, or I might need to walk upstairs for a moment. And it's not because I'm ignoring you, and it's not because I don't love you. It's because I'm trying to change our pattern. Okay? Does that make sense? So I want to offer this to you guys. I was talking to a friend of mine, a couple, just a few days ago. We were talking about how they communicate in their marriage. And my friend, he was saying that growing up, the way that he learned how to talk about things emotionally, his emotional habit was to argue and to get really emotional, to get very vocal and aggressively vocal about whatever it was that he was feeling, and for the other person to get aggressively vocal back. And yet with his wife, she is not aggressively vocal. She does not rise up. And so it's sometimes frustrating for him because growing up, he equated aggressively vocal. He equated that with passion, and passion meaning that the other person cares, right? In his mind, if the other person is expressing themselves in the same way and matching his emotional level, then they care. And because his wife does not respond in the same way, because she is more calm and does not, let's say, quote unquote, fight back or argue, he feels like she doesn't care, or he has felt that way in the past. They've been married for a long time. They've worked on this. But it was something that was really frustrating for him. He has said, like, even at times in their marriage where he's gotten upset or angry or emotional about something, he's even told her, I want you to yell. I want you to get upset. And she's like, I am upset. I'm just quietly upset. And his emotional habit, what he's familiar with, is arguing, with getting aggressively vocal. And that's what he was comfortable with. That was his emotional habit. And then it has taken years of being married and working on this to change that emotional habit and to be okay with something different. Okay, so that's just one example. So I want you guys, again, I want to offer today that you start thinking, okay, what are the relationships? And again, I would encourage you to do this with every single one, especially in your immediate family, of people that you interact with. And I do not want you to disclude yourself. I want you to also include yourself. But what are the emotional habits that I have when I interact with this person? What are my emotional habits when I interact with myself? When I think about myself, when I think about what I'm doing, when I think about what I want to do, what are the emotions that come up? What emotional habits do I have? And the same thing with interacting with others. What are the emotional habits that I have when I interact with my spouse, my children, take each child individually, with my in-laws, with my best friend, and then reevaluate that and say, are there things in there that I want to change? Do I want to change that I get jealous every time I hear my friend talk about how she got together with somebody else? Is that an emotional habit that is benefiting me and helping me show up in the way that I want to? Or is that something that I want to change? Your emotional habits, ladies, are just as important, if not more important, than your physical habits, because your physical habits are just a reflection of the emotional habits that are driving them. And if you want to change the physical habits in your life, you start with the emotional ones. And the emotions that you feel, the emotional habits that you have created, are all coming from the thoughts that you're thinking, subconscious and conscious. Those things are driving the emotions that you feel, the emotional habits that you have created. And every emotional habit that we have is what generates all of our reactions and actions in our life. So if you really want to change and make 2025 a completely different year than last year, if you want to make sure that this is not just a repeat of every single year from the last 5 years, this is the thing that we need to focus on and change. This is what we're going to be focusing on next week in my masterclass. This is what I want to offer that you come with me and work on, because this is how we change everything. And this is how you make a completely different life for yourself. Even if your circumstances don't change, even if your husband still gets defensive or offensive when he walks in the door, even if your best friend still forgets your birthday every single year, even if your child is driving you up the wall and they don't change their behavior and they're not any more, kind or respectful, or they don't spend any more time with you than they already do, this is how you change your relationships. Okay. And here's what I want to shift into is that our emotional habits are what lead to our emotional decisions. And again, this came up with my husband. We were talking about something that he was struggling with. He was feeling anxious and he was making a decision about work. And he was talking about whether or not he would come home for lunch. And this sounds so simple. Okay. He works maybe 10 minutes away. He hasn't really worked a whole lot the last 6 months. He's been pretty much retired, but he's subbing occasionally, and he is going to be going into work a couple of days. And he was talking about whether or not he was going to come home for lunch. And he said that he's like, I really like coming home for lunch. It's kind of a nice break, but it also makes it more difficult. I don't like going to work. And so getting myself to work in the morning is so hard that I don't want to have to do it again. So it's almost easier to not come home for lunch, because then I have to get myself to go back to work again. I already got myself to work once. I don't want to have to do it again. And as I was sitting there, I knew this had nothing to do with me, but my feelings got hurt a little bit. I was like, I would love to see you in the middle of the day. You work less than 10 minutes away. Like, I would feel a little like maybe you don't want to see me in the middle of the day if you don't come home for lunch. And he sat there and he said, this isn't about you. This is not a decision about you. This is an anxiety decision. And it was so fascinating. As soon as he said that, my immediate thought was, I am so tired of living my life around your anxiety. And that was not me at my best. I'm just being honest. That was my first thought. I was like, man, we have been dealing with your anxiety for our entire marriage. I am tired of living my life around your anxiety. I am tired of the decisions that you make around your emotions. And we all do this. And it made me realize that we make emotional decisions. And maybe this is a totally different podcast, but I felt like it aligned so much with our emotional habits. Because when you have a habit of creating a certain emotion or responding in a certain way emotionally, then you make emotional decisions. And I don't mean the choices you make when you're feeling the emotions. I don't mean those decisions, not those emotional decisions. I mean the decisions that you make because of the emotion that you're feeling. Okay? It's very different. Okay? I'm not talking about reacting. I'm talking about almost acting ahead of time. Okay? Knowing, okay, I know I'm going to feel anxious, so this is the decision I'm going to make ahead of time because of the emotion that I'm going to feel. Those decisions. That is what happens when we have an emotional habit. What decisions, ladies, do you make around your emotions? And is that the life you want to live? And I know that so many of you are still in a place where you are making decisions around that emotion, around the insecurity you feel when you are around your husband. Maybe you don't go on a trip, or you avoid certain locations, or you avoid certain people. And I have been there, ladies. I have done this. I have not gone on trips. I have avoided certain people in my life. I have felt and made so many decisions around my emotions because those were the emotional decisions that I was having because of the emotional habits that I had created. The emotional habit of making my husband's pornography problem mean something about me. The emotional habit of feeling like I wasn't enough. And most of us, the thing is that's so interesting is that most of us don't even realize that that's even a possibility to change. And that's the biggest lie that I've ever heard, and the one that I'm just so committed to changing for each one of you, is changing that belief in yourself. The biggest lie is that there's nothing you can do. And that's the biggest lie that Satan has ever perpetuated, is this is just how life is. And it's not true. You have so much more control than you believe that you do. You do not have to keep making emotional decisions. You do not have to keep making decisions to circumvent or walk around the emotions that you feel. You can change those emotional habits. And by doing so, it changes so that you don't have to make emotional decisions. You don't have to live your life around your insecurity. You don't have to live your life around your anxiety. You don't have to live your life around the emotions that you feel. Instead, you can change them. So again, I want to offer that you reflect on this, is what decisions do you make around your emotions? And is that producing the life that you want to live? And if not, please come to next week's masterclass. I'm going to teach you how to change all of this, to set this up as a year for you. So it's not just another year of your life, but a year where you actually get to start taking control. It's time to change those emotional habits that you no longer want, and that you stop making emotional decisions or decisions around your emotions, and instead change all of those and make it something that you're doing intentionally. This is what I want for you. I want this to be a year for you. So take a look, and if it's not producing what you want, then it's time to change it. And I'll teach you how. I love you ladies so much. I'll see you guys next week on a brand new episode. Hopefully I'll see you guys next week on the masterclass. And I hope you guys have a brilliant new year. All right, my lady, if you love what you're hearing on the podcast and you're ready to take it and apply it in your life to see a true transformation, then I want to invite you to come join my coaching program. Now is the best time because I have just added an annual membership, so you can join for the lowest price ever. Get all the details on my website, jolenewind.com, and don't forget to sign up for a free consultation call with me today. We'll get on the call, we'll talk about where you are, what you're struggling with, and then we'll see what is the right fit for you and your budget. Again, go to my website, jolenewind.com, sign up for a call, and I'll see you there.